The phone rang at 6:42 in the morning. I remember the time because I had been sitting at my kitchen table since 5, staring at a piece of paper I didn't want to read again. My name is Walter Combs. I am 68 years old. I spent 41 years fixing engines at Hargrove Trucking before my knees gave out, and they let me go with a small pension and a handshake. I live alone now, in the same house I raised my 2 kids in, on Miller Street, 3 blocks from the church where my wife's funeral was held 9 years ago. The paper on the table was from Dr. Avrill's office. Stage 2. Pancreatic. The surgery had to happen within the month or the window would close. The number at the bottom of the page was $3,500. Not the whole cost, just my part after insurance before I could even get on the schedule. I picked up the phone on the 3rd ring. "Dad?" Marcus said. "You're up early." My son's voice always sounded like it was already halfway to somewhere else. Marcus was 41, ran his own investment firm downtown, drove a car worth more than my house was worth 20 years ago. I hadn't asked him for anything since he was 18 and needed gas money. "I need to talk to you about something," I said. "It's about my health." There was a pause. In the background, I could hear him typing. "Can it wait? I've got a call with a client in Singapore in 10 minutes. I looked at the paper again. My hand was shaking a little, though I told myself it was just the coffee. "I have cancer, Marcus. Pancreatic. They want to operate soon. I need help covering my part. $3,500. The typing stopped. "Jesus, Dad. Okay, that's okay, let me think. I wouldn't ask if I had another way." I know you wouldn't." He exhaled slowly, the kind of sound a man makes when he's already building an excuse before he says it out loud. "Look, things are tight right now. I just closed on the lake house, and there's the boat loan, and Cheryl's got the girls in that private school now. You know how that was." I did not know how to lake house. I had never had a boat. "It's $3,500, I said again, like saying it twice might change something. "Not 35,000. I know what you said." His voice sharpened, just slightly. "Have you talked to Dana? She could probably." "Dana works at a diner, Marcus. She doesn't have $3,500 lying around." "Well, I don't either. Not right now. Cash flow's weird this quarter, Dad. You don't understand how business works. Everything's tied up in." "I understand plenty," I said quietly. Silence stretched between us. I thought about the summer I taught him to change a tire on the shoulder of Route 9. How proud he'd looked getting his hands dirty for the first time. I thought about the truck I sold to pay for his first semester of college, the one I never replaced. "I'll figure something out," he finally said. "Talk to Dana. I really have to take this call. Marcus, I love you, Dad. We'll talk later, okay?" The line went dead before I could answer. I sat there holding the phone against my ear for a long moment after the call ended, listening to nothing. Outside the kitchen window, a gray sky was starting to spit rain onto the driveway where his old bicycle used to lean against the fence, back when he still visited on Sundays. I set the phone down and looked at the refrigerator, at a photograph held up by a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Marcus at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, grinning like the world belonged to him. Next to it, a photo of Dana at 10, holding a fishing rod almost bigger than she was, my late wife Ellen laughing beside her, 2 kids. Same house, same rules. I never understood how 2 people raised under one roof could turn out so different. My phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. A text from Dana. "Hey Dad, thinking about you. You feeling okay today? Can I bring dinner over Friday?" I stared at those words for a long time before I typed back. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Friday sounds good." I did not tell her about the diagnosis. Not yet. She had enough on her plate. 2 jobs. A boy in middle school she was raising on her own since her husband left. A car that made a sound like a dying animal every time she started it. I did not want to be one more weight on her shoulders, but I knew, even as I typed that lie, that I would have to tell her eventually. The surgery had a deadline. Cancer does not wait for anyone's convenience. I did not sleep much that week. I kept running numbers in my head, the way I used to run numbers on a truck engine that wasn't worth fixing anymore. Social Security covered my mortgage and utilities and not much else. My savings, what little I'd managed to hold on to after Ellen's medical bills 9 years back, had maybe $600 in it. I thought about asking the bank for a loan. At my age, with my income, they laughed politely and told me to consider other options. I thought about selling the truck, my only truck, the one I needed to get to the pharmacy and the grocery store, and soon to chemotherapy appointments. Selling it might get me halfway there, and then I'd have no way to get anywhere at all. I thought, more than once, about not having the surgery. I did not tell anyone that thought, but it sat with me in the quiet hours, the way bad thoughts do when the house is empty and the only sound is the refrigerator humming. Friday came. Dana knocked twice before letting herself in, the way she always had, carrying a paper bag that smelled like rotisserie chicken and green beans. "You look tired, Dad," she said, setting the bag on the counter. Her eyes moved over my face the way her mother's used to, reading things I hadn't said out loud. "Long week," I said. She started pulling containers out of the bag, moving around my kitchen like it was still hers too. Dana was 38 now, but standing in that kitchen, she still moved like the teenage girl who used to make dinner on the nights Ellen worked late shifts at the hospital. "Tommy made honor roll," she said, setting plates on the table. "First time. I about cried in the parking lot. That's wonderful, Dana." He takes after his grandmother. She always said hard work matters more than luck. We sat down. She talked about her shifts at the diner, about a manager who was finally giving her more hours, about Tommy's science fair project involving baking soda volcanoes. I listened and nodded and tried to eat, but the food sat heavy in my stomach, and not because of the cancer. Halfway through dinner, she set her fork down and looked at me directly. "Dad, what's going on?" "You've been somewhere else all night." I could have lied again. I had a whole week of practice lying by then. Instead, I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the folded paper from Dr. Averil's office, the one I'd been carrying around like a stone in my chest. I slid it across the table. She read it. I watched her face change, watched the color drain out of it, the way water drains from a sink. "Dad." Her voice cracked on the single word. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to worry you. You've got enough." "Enough what?" "A father with cancer isn't something you just don't mention." She was already standing, already pacing, the way she used to when she was small and upset about something she couldn't fix with her hands. "When is the surgery?" "What do you need?" "I need $3,500, Dana. By the end of the month, or I lose the surgery window." She stopped pacing. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in her face I didn't expect. Not panic, not helplessness. Something steadier than that. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we'll figure it out. Dana, you don't have that kind of money. I know what you make. I'm not asking you. You didn't ask. I'm offering." She sat back down, took my hand across the table, her grip firm despite how thin her fingers were from years of carrying trays. "Have you told Marcus?" I hesitated a beat too long. "I told him Tuesday," I admitted. Something passed behind her eyes. She didn't ask what he'd said. She didn't have to. 20 years of watching her brother make excuses had taught her exactly what silence like mine meant. "Doesn't matter," she said, and her voice was steady now, steadier than I felt. "You're not going to lose this surgery, Dad. I don't care what I have to do." I wanted to tell her not to make promises she couldn't keep. I wanted to tell her that pride was the only thing I had left, and I hated needing anyone's help, especially my daughter's, when I should have been the one helping her. But something in the way she held my hand made the words stay in my throat. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping soft against the kitchen window, and I sat there wondering how a woman with so little had just offered me everything. 2 days after that dinner, I found out exactly what Dana meant by whatever I have to do. I drove past the diner where she worked, Mel's, on the corner of 5th and Grant, the kind of place with a neon sign missing its M, so it just read L's after dark. And I saw her car still in the lot at 11 at night. Her shift ended at 7. I parked across the street and watched through the window for a minute. She was still in her apron, wiping down the counter, and an older man I didn't recognize was talking to her, gesturing at a clipboard. When she came out 20 minutes later, she looked exhausted, in a way I hadn't seen since Tommy was a baby, and she was raising him alone on no sleep. I didn't go in. I didn't want her to know I'd been watching. But I called her the next morning. "You picked up extra shifts," I said. "Not a question." "How'd you know that?" "Doesn't matter. Dana, I told you not to. You didn't tell me anything, Dad. You just worried out loud. There's a difference." I could hear Tommy's cartoons playing somewhere behind her, the clatter of a cereal bowl. "Mel's letting me pick up the early morning shift too. 6 to 2, then I go straight to the dinner rush somewhere else if I want it." "It's fine." "It's not fine. You'll run yourself into the ground. I ran a marathon once, remember? Junior year. You said I'd never finish, and I finished." Her voice had that particular note of stubbornness that she got from her mother, the one that used to make Ellen equal parts proud and terrified. "I'm not asking your permission, Dad. I'm telling you what's happening." I sat with the phone against my ear in the same kitchen chair where I'd sat when Marcus hung up on me, and I felt something crack open in my chest that had nothing to do with the tumor. "Thank you," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're walking out of that hospital." 3 weeks passed. I went in for more tests, more scans, more forms to sign. Dr. Averil's nurse, a kind woman named Priscilla with silver hair pulled back tight, started recognizing my voice on the phone before I gave my name. Marcus called twice during those 3 weeks. Both times it was quick. A birthday reminder for his daughter, a question about whether I still had his old baseball glove in the garage. Neither call mentioned the surgery. Neither call mentioned the $3,500. I did not bring it up either. I had decided somewhere in those weeks that I would not ask him twice. Then, on a Sunday, Marcus called and asked if he could come by for dinner. I said yes before I could think better of it. Some part of me, the part that still remembered an 8-year-old boy with a missing tooth, wanted to believe he was coming to make things right. He arrived in a car I didn't recognize, dark and low to the ground, the kind of car that costs more than most people's houses. He wore a blazer even though it was just dinner at his father's kitchen table. He hugged me at the door, quick and stiff, the way men hug when they're not quite sure how. "You look good, Dad," he said, which was a lie, because I had lost 11 pounds since the diagnosis and my collar hung loose around my neck. "Sit down, I made pot roast." We ate. He talked about the firm, about a deal that had fallen through with a client in Charlotte, about Cheryl's plans to renovate the kitchen at the lake house. I nodded along, half listening, waiting for him to bring up the reason he'd really come. He didn't bring it up until dessert, when Dana's name came up almost by accident. I mentioned she'd stopped by earlier that week to change my sheets, since I'd been too tired to do it myself. Marcus's fork paused over his pie. "She's still working all those shifts?" he asked. "She's helping me with the surgery money," I said carefully. "Since you said things were tight." Something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt, not quite shame, something more careful than either. "Dad, I told you I'd figure something out. I just needed time. The surgery's in 3 weeks, Marcus. Time is the one thing I don't have a lot of." He set his fork down. "Look, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. I did some research. There are payment plans through the hospital, charity programs. You don't need to put this all on Dana's shoulders, or mine, frankly. There are systems for this exact situation." I stared at my son across the table, at the gold watch on his wrist that alone probably cost more than what I was asking him for. "I already looked into all of that," I said. "The payment plan still requires the $3,500 up front. The charity programs have 6-month waiting lists." "I don't have 6 months, Marcus." Dr. Averil was very clear about that. "Well, I'm just saying, there might be options you haven't. I've had cancer for a month," I said, and my voice came out sharper than I meant it to. "I've had more time to research this than you've spent thinking about it in one afternoon. There isn't another option. There's the money, or there's no surgery." The kitchen went quiet. Outside, I could hear a neighbor's dog barking at something in the dark. "I didn't come here to fight with you," Marcus said finally. "I know. I don't think you know why you came here at all." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. Maybe I had, in the only way I had left to hit back. He left 20 minutes later, hugging me at the door again, that same stiff, uncertain hug. He said he'd call. He said he loved me. He got into his expensive dark car and drove off into the night. And I stood on my porch for a long time after his taillights disappeared around the corner, feeling colder than the weather explained. The next morning, I had an appointment with Dr. Averill to review the surgical timeline. Dana drove me, since I'd been advised not to drive after the sedation from my last scan wore off unevenly. She sat beside me in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine without really reading it, her knee bouncing the way it used to when she was a kid waiting to hear if she'd made the softball team. "You seem tense," I said. "I picked up a double today. I'm going straight from here to Mel's." She didn't look up from the magazine. "It's fine, Dad. Don't worry about me." "Dana." "What? Why are you doing this? Really, you have Tommy. You have your own bills. You could have told me you couldn't help, and I would have understood." She finally looked at me, and there was something old in her eyes, older than 38. older than the years should have allowed. Because you never once, not one single time in my whole life, made me feel like I was less than Marcus, she said. Even when I dropped out of community college, even when Rick left and I had to move back into a one-bedroom with a toddler, you never looked at me the way, she stopped herself. The way what? The way Marcus looks at me now, like I'm a cautionary tale he uses to feel better about himself. She shook her head, went back to the magazine, though her hands weren't quite steady. You're my dad. You raised me right even when it was just you, and no money and a mortgage you could barely make. I'm not going to let you die because your son bought a boat. The nurse called my name before I could respond. Priscilla, with her silver hair and her clipboard, smiling gently in that practiced way medical staff learn. Mr. Combs, Dr. Averill will see you now. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting the way they always did, and Dana stood with me, her hand steady under my elbow even though I hadn't asked for the help. Dr. Averill's office smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. He was a small, precise man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, and he did not waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Combs, I want to be direct with you, he said, folding his hands on the desk. The scan from Tuesday shows the tumor has grown since our last imaging. Not dramatically, but enough that I'm concerned. I'd like to move the surgery date up if at all possible. My stomach dropped. Move it up to when? 2 weeks from today, if we can arrange the payment and the pre-surgical clearance in time. Any longer than that, and we may be looking at a different, more complicated procedure, possibly a different prognosis. Dana's hand tightened on my arm. 2 weeks, I repeated. I understand that's fast, but Mr. Combs, I would strongly encourage you not to delay. I did the math in my head, the same math I'd been doing for a month. 2 weeks, $3,500. A son who wanted to talk about payment plans and charity programs with waiting lists longer than I had time left. Dana spoke before I could. We'll have it. 2 weeks, we'll have it, doctor. Dr. Averill nodded, made a note, and moved on to the surgical details, the recovery timeline, the risks he was required by law to list out loud. I heard maybe half of it. The other half of my mind was on my daughter's face, on the fierce quiet certainty in her voice, and on the growing, uncomfortable knowledge that I did not know how she planned to keep that promise. That night, after Dana dropped me home and drove off to her second shift, I sat at my kitchen table again, in the same chair, under the same weak overhead light. I opened my old checkbook, the leather cover cracked from 20 years of use, and I went through every account I had, one more time, hoping I'd missed something. I hadn't. I thought about calling Marcus again. I thought about swallowing what was left of my pride and asking him directly, one more time, man to man, father to son. But I remembered the way he'd looked at me across the pot roast, talking about payment plans like I hadn't already done the homework, like my cancer was a problem I simply hadn't researched hard enough. Instead, I picked up an old photo album from the shelf by the window. Ellen had made it years ago, back when people still printed pictures. I flipped through pages of birthdays and Christmases, of 2 kids growing up in the same small rooms, until I found the picture I was looking for. Marcus, maybe 16, standing beside a car he'd saved up for himself, a beat-up Honda he was so proud of, grinning ear to ear with his arm around Dana, who must have been 13, laughing at something outside the frame. They used to be close. I remembered that, even if it felt like a different lifetime now. My phone rang, startling me. I almost didn't answer, thinking it might be Marcus again. Another conversation I didn't have the strength for tonight. It was Dana. "Dad," she said, and her voice had a strange, tight quality to it, like she was trying to sound calmer than she felt. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not be angry." My chest tightened. "Dana, what did you do?" There was a long pause on the line, long enough that I could hear the sound of the diner behind her, dishes clattering, someone laughing too loud. "I talked to Mel," she finally said, "about taking out a loan against my car, and I put in an application for a second job. But Dad, it's still not going to be enough by itself, not in 2 weeks." "Then what?" "I have one more idea," she said, "but I don't think you're going to like it." "What idea?" I said, though something in her tone already had my stomach in knots. "There's a woman who comes into Mel's most mornings, Regina Alvarez. She's a loan officer over at Coastal Community Credit Union. We talk sometimes, she's nice." Dana's voice was rushed now, like she needed to get the words out before she lost her nerve. "She told me about a program they run for medical hardship. Short-term loan, low interest, fast approval if you've got a cosigner with decent credit. And you don't have decent credit, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. I knew about the collections calls she used to get after Rick left, the years she'd spent digging herself out of a hole he'd dug for both of them. No, I don't. A pause. But you do, Dad. Your credit's clean. 40 years of paying every bill on time even when it hurt. I understood then, and something cold moved through me. You want me to co-sign a loan for my own surgery money. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you putting your name on a debt tied to a house you don't own, backed by credit that took me a lifetime to build, so an 80-year-old truck mechanic with cancer can qualify for a loan he has no way of paying back if the surgery doesn't work. Don't talk like that. Her voice cracked just slightly. Don't talk like it isn't going to work. I closed my eyes. I could hear Tommy in the background of her end of the line now, asking her something about homework, and I could hear the exhaustion under her patience when she answered him. Dana, if something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. She said it like a wall going up, immovable, daring me to push against it. Regina said, if we come in tomorrow morning, she can walk us through it. $3,500, maybe a little more for the cushion Dr. Averill mentioned for post-op care. 6% interest, 18-month term. I already ran the numbers, Dad. I can make the payments. I picked up the extra shifts specifically so I could make the payments. You shouldn't have to do any of this. I know, she said, and for the first time that night, her voice wavered, just for a second before she pulled it back tight. But he won't, and you're running out of time. And I'm not going to sit here and watch you disappear because pride won't let you take help from the kid who actually shows up. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't, all these months later. Okay, I said. Tomorrow morning. Coastal Community Credit Union was not a lawyer's office, but it felt like one that morning. All gray carpet and hushed voices, and Regina Alvarez's small, tidy desk covered in folders, with my name typed across the tabs. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes, and a way of explaining numbers that didn't make me feel stupid for not understanding them right away. The loan itself is straightforward, she said, sliding papers across the desk. Mr. Combs, as the co-signer, you're guaranteeing the debt alongside your daughter. If for any reason Dana can't make a payment, the obligation falls to you. Understood, I said. Though the words sat heavy in my mouth, Dana signed first, her handwriting neat and careful, the same handwriting she'd had since grade school. I watched her hand move across the page and felt something twist inside me. Pride and grief tangled together so tight, I couldn't tell which was which. I signed next. My hand shook a little more than hers. Congratulations, Regina said, gathering the papers. Funds should clear within 48 hours. That should give you plenty of time before the surgery date. Outside in the parking lot, Dana hugged me hard, the kind of hug that says more than words do. Over her shoulder, I watched cars pass on the street, ordinary people living ordinary mornings, and I thought about how strange it was that my life had come down to a stack of papers in a credit union. See? She said, pulling back, wiping quickly at her eyes like she hoped I hadn't noticed. We did it. It's handled. You did it, I said. I just signed my name. That's not nothing, Dad. Word travels fast in families, even families that don't talk much. I don't know exactly how Marcus found out about the loan. Whether Dana told him herself, hoping it might shame him into helping, or whether it came from somewhere else. But 3 days later, on a Thursday evening, his car pulled into my driveway, and he walked up to my front door without calling first, something he hadn't done in years. I opened the door and he was standing there in his work clothes, tie loosened, jaw tight in a way that reminded me, unexpectedly, of his mother when she was building up to an argument. Can I come in? He asked. It's your childhood home, Marcus. You don't have to ask. He stepped inside, looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time in years, though he'd been here for that pot roast dinner just weeks before. He didn't sit down. Dana told me about the loan, he said. I figured she might. Dad, do you understand what you did? You co-signed a loan you have no income to support if something goes wrong. If she misses even one payment, that's on your credit, your assets, this house. I'm aware of the terms, Marcus. I read every page before I signed. Did you? Because it doesn't sound like it, if you actually went through with this. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, the same nervous energy I remembered from when he was a boy in trouble at school. This is reckless. This is exactly the kind of thing that happens when people panic instead of thinking clearly. Something in me, something that had been quiet and patient for weeks, finally came loose. I wasn't panicking, Marcus. I was drowning. There's a difference, and nobody threw me a rope except your sister. That's not fair, isn't it? My voice rose louder than I intended, loud enough that I saw him flinch. I asked you for $3,500, one time. In 41 years of working, I never asked either of you kids for a dime. And you told me about payment plans and charity waiting lists like I hadn't already spent a month looking into every option there was. I have a family to think about, Dad. Obligations. You don't just liquidate assets on a moment's notice. I'm not asking you to liquidate anything. I was asking you to help save my life. There's a difference between that and a boat payment. The words landed hard. I watched them land. Marcus went very still, his face draining of color the way it used to when Ellen caught him in a lie as a boy. You think I don't want to help you? His voice had dropped, quieter now, but somehow sharper. You think this is easy for me, watching my father go through this? I think you've made your choices very clear, son. And I think your sister, who has nothing, gave everything without blinking. And you, who has everything, couldn't spare what most people spend on a weekend at that lake house. Outside, it had started raining again. The same steady rain that seemed to follow every hard conversation in my life that year. Marcus stood in my living room, soaked in silence. And for a moment I thought he might actually say something honest, something real, something that might have started to fix the widening gap between us. Instead, his jaw tightened, and something closed behind his eyes, like a door shutting. You don't know everything, Dad, he said quietly, about my finances, about what's actually going on. Then tell me. He hesitated. For just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear, maybe, or shame, something raw underneath all that polish. Then it was gone, replaced by the same careful, controlled expression he wore in every business meeting I'd never been invited to. It doesn't matter, he said. I should go. Marcus, I'll call you before the surgery. I hope it goes well. I mean that. He was already moving toward the door, already retreating into the version of himself I'd grown used to over the last several years. Present in body, absent in everything that mattered. Marcus, wait. He stopped at the door, hand on the knob, rain visible through the small window beside it, streaking down like the house itself was crying. What? He said, not turning around. Is there something wrong? Something you're not telling me? The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might actually answer. His shoulders were tense, his knuckles white against the doorknob. When he finally spoke, his voice came out strange, flat, careful, like a man choosing his words around a wound he didn't want anyone to see. There's a lot you don't know, he said. About the firm, about Cheryl, about the lake house. He turned partway, just enough that I could see the side of his face, pale and tired in the porch light. I didn't come here tonight to fight about the loan, Dad. I came here because I needed to see you before. He stopped himself. Before what? I asked, my whole body suddenly cold. Marcus looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he shook his head, opened the door, and stepped out into the rain without answering. I'll call you, he said again, over his shoulder. Before the surgery, I stood in the doorway and watched his taillights disappear down Miller Street for the sun. In 3 weeks, the rain soaking into the welcome mat at my feet, and I realized that whatever I thought I understood about my son's refusal to help me, the boat, the lake house, the excuses, none of it was the whole story. Something else was going on, something he was hiding, and in 11 days, I was going into surgery not knowing what it was. The 11 days before surgery moved strangely, too fast when I thought about how little time I had left to prepare, too slow when I lay awake at 3 in the morning turning Marcus's words over in my head. There's a lot you don't know. I couldn't shake them loose. Dana came by most evenings after her shifts, exhausted but steady, helping me organize the paperwork Dr. Averill's office required, sitting with me through the pre-surgical calls from the hospital's financial office confirming the loan funds had cleared. She never mentioned Marcus unless I brought him up first, and even then, she kept her answers short, careful, like she was protecting some private anger she didn't want to unleash in front of me. You've been quiet about your brother, I said one night, as she packed up the leftover containers from dinner. Nothing to say. She didn't look up, Dana, she sighed, finally meeting my eyes. I talked to him after he came by here that night. I told him what I thought of him. And he didn't argue with me, Dad. That's what got me. Usually he's got some explanation, some justification. This time he just took it, said I was right. She shook her head, frustrated. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like something was wrong with him. I thought about the look on his face in my doorway, rain streaking the window behind him. There's a lot you don't know. I think there is something wrong, I said. I think he's hiding something. Dana's jaw tightened. I don't have room to worry about Marcus's secrets right now, Dad. I'm trying to keep you alive. I let it go. But the thought didn't leave me. The morning of the surgery came gray and cold, the kind of November morning that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. Dana drove me to the hospital before 6, Tommy still asleep in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, because she hadn't been able to find a sitter that early. The pre-op room was small and bright, smelling of rubbing alcohol and clean linen. A nurse helped me into a gown that tied in the back, took my vitals, asked me questions I'd already answered a dozen times on paperwork. Dana sat in the plastic chair beside my bed holding my hand, her thumb moving in slow circles over my knuckles, the way her mother used to do when I was anxious about something. "You scared?" she asked. "A little," I admitted. "Mostly I keep thinking about your mother." Wondering what she'd say if she saw us here, Dana's eyes went glassy. She'd say you're stubborn and you should have told us the day you found out instead of carrying it alone for weeks. Probably right. The door opened, and I expected Priscilla or one of the other nurses. Instead, Marcus stood in the doorway, still in a wrinkled shirt like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed at the house. "Marcus," I said, surprised. "I said I'd call before the surgery." His voice was rough. I figured showing up was better. Dana stiffened beside me, but she didn't say anything, just watched him with careful, guarded eyes. Marcus stepped further into the room, and I saw he was carrying something, a plain white envelope, slightly crumpled, like it had been through several pockets before landing in his hand. "I need to say something before they take you back," he said, "and I need you both to hear it." He sat down heavily in the second chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor for a long moment before he could get the words out. 6 months ago, the firm lost a major client, nearly 40% of our managed accounts, gone almost overnight, because of a bad call I made on an investment I pushed too hard. His voice was flat, mechanical, like he'd rehearsed this and still couldn't quite believe he was saying it out loud. "I've been bleeding money ever since, trying to cover the gap before the partners noticed. The lake house isn't paid off. It's mortgaged twice over. The boat's about to get repossessed. Cheryl doesn't even know how bad it is." The room went very quiet. Outside, I could hear a cart rattling down the hallway, someone's pager going off in the distance. "When you asked me for the $3,500, Marcus continued, "I didn't say no because I didn't want to help you, Dad. I said no because I genuinely didn't have it. I've got maybe $400 in my actual checking account right now. Everything else is leveraged, borrowed, or already spent trying to keep the firm from collapsing. I've been too ashamed to tell anyone. I let you both think I was just selfish, because the truth felt worse." Dana's hand had gone still on mine. I watched her face carefully, watched something complicated move across it. Not quite forgiveness, not quite anger, something caught between the two. "Why didn't you just tell us that?" she asked, her voice tight. "Instead of talking about payment plans like Dad hadn't already done his homework?" "Because admitting I failed felt like the one thing I couldn't survive," Marcus said quietly. "You know how it was growing up. Dad never said it out loud, but I always felt like I had to be the success story, the one who made it. And I built this whole life, the house, the car, the school for the girls, on a foundation that's basically sand. I didn't know how to say that to either of you without everything collapsing." He held out the envelope toward me, his hand not quite steady. "I sold my watch," he said, "the one Cheryl gave me for our 10th anniversary. And I pawned some equipment from my home office I wasn't using. It's not $3,500. It's about $600. It's not enough. I know it's not enough, but I wanted you to have something from me. Not a loan somebody else co-signed, something that actually came from me." I took the envelope with hands that weren't entirely steady either. Inside was a stack of bills, worn and uneven, clearly gathered in a hurry from more than one source. "Marcus," I started. "I know it doesn't fix what I did," he said quickly, cutting me off before I could finish. I know Dana's the one who actually saved you. I'm not trying to make this about me getting credit. I just needed you to know the truth before you went into that room. I needed you to know it wasn't that I didn't care." A nurse appeared in the doorway then, apologetic but firm. "Mr. Combs, we need to start prepping you for the OR. Family will need to head to the waiting area." Dana stood first, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "I'll be right there when you wake up," she said. "I promise." Marcus stood too, hovering awkwardly near the foot of the bed, like he wasn't sure he'd earned the right to touch me goodbye. I reached out and caught his wrist before he could pull away. "Thank you for telling the truth," I said. "It's late, but it's not nothing." His eyes filled, and for the first time since he was a teenager, I watched my son cry without trying to hide it. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. The boat, the excuses, letting Dana carry this alone. I'm going to fix it. I don't know how yet, but I am." "Start by telling your sister the truth about the firm," I said. "All of it. Not just the parts that make you look sympathetic." He nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand, looking, for just a moment, like the boy who used to grin at me over a beat-up Honda he was so proud of. The nurse began wheeling my bed toward the door. The last thing I saw before the hallway lights blurred together was Dana and Marcus standing side by side, not quite touching, but closer than they'd been in years, watching me disappear around the corner. I don't remember much of the surgery itself, of course. I remember counting backward from 10 under the anesthesiologist's calm instruction, and then nothing. A gap in my life where 6 hours simply vanished. When I woke, the room was dim, machines beeping steadily somewhere near my head, my throat raw and dry. Dana was asleep in the chair beside my bed, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, still in the same clothes from that morning. Marcus was in the other chair, awake, scrolling through something on his phone with the particular stillness of a man trying not to disturb anyone. He noticed my eyes open and sat forward immediately. "Dad." "Hey, you're okay." "Surgery went well. Dr. Everill said they got it all. Clean margins. No complications." His voice was rough with exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "You've been out about 2 hours." I tried to speak, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. He reached for a small cup of ice chips on the tray beside the bed and held it out to me. The same careful gesture Dana had made 100 times over the past month. Dana stirred at the sound of our voices, blinking awake, immediately alert the way tired mothers learn to be. "Dad, you're awake." She was up out of the chair in an instant, taking my hand on one side while Marcus still held the ice chips on the other. For the first time in longer than I could remember, both my children were beside my bed at the same time, neither one pulling away from the other. "Clean margins," I managed to whisper. "That's good news, that's great news," Dana said, laughing through tears that had started falling before she seemed to notice. I looked between them, my daughter, who had given everything she had without being asked twice, and my son, who had finally, at the worst possible moment, found the courage to be honest. I didn't know yet how any of it would settle. I didn't know if Marcus would truly follow through, if the fracture between him and Dana would heal or simply scar over. I didn't know how the loan would get paid, or how Marcus would rebuild what he'd lost. But for the first time in a month, sitting in that hospital bed with tubes in my arm and my whole body aching, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel since the day I read that diagnosis. Hope. Recovery took longer than I expected. 6 weeks of slow mornings, careful walks around the block, follow-up scans that made my stomach knot every time I sat in Dr. Averill's waiting room. But the scans kept coming back clean, and little by little, the fear that had lived in my chest since that first diagnosis began to loosen its grip. Dana came by almost every day, even after I insisted I could manage on my own. She'd bring groceries, sit with me while I ate, sometimes just to make sure I was actually eating and not pushing food around a plate out of stubbornness. Tommy came with her more often now, doing his homework at my kitchen table while I dozed in the recliner, the sound of his pencil scratching against paper becoming a small, steady comfort. Marcus called every few days. Real calls, not the rushed, distracted ones from before. He told me slowly in pieces over those weeks what he was doing to fix things. He'd sat down with Cheryl and told her everything. The failed accounts, the debt, the years of hiding it. I don't know exactly what was said between them, but I know they put the lake house on the market within the month. I know the boat was gone before I finished my second round of follow-up scans. She didn't leave, he told me. One evening, his voice tired but steadier than I'd heard it in years. I thought she would. I would have understood if she had, but she said she married me, not the house. Said she'd rather have an honest husband with less than a liar with a boat. Your mother would have liked her for that, I said. Yeah, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, small but real. I think she would have. It was Marcus in the end who insisted on meeting with Regina Alvarez at the credit union. I hadn't asked him to. I found out only when Dana called me, half laughing, half in disbelief, telling me her brother had shown up at Coastal Community unannounced and asked to see the terms of the loan. He wants to take over the payments, she told me. All of it. Said it's the least he can do, since I carried the weight he should have carried in the first place. Can he afford that? With everything falling apart at the firm? He says selling the boat and the second property covers more than he thought. Says he's downsizing everything. New apartment, used car, the whole thing. Cheryl's going back to work too, some marketing job she used to do before the girls were born. Dana's voice had a note of wonder in it, like she still wasn't sure she believed what she was describing. He cried, Dad, in front of Regina, just started talking about how ashamed he was, how he let his pride cost him years with his own family. I sat with that for a long moment, picturing my son, the boy who once beamed over a beat-up Honda, the man who'd built a life on borrowed money and unspoken fear, finally laying it all down in a credit union office in front of strangers. How do you feel about it? I asked her. Him taking over the payments. There was a pause, relieved, honestly, and a little angry still. I don't think that goes away overnight. But he showed up, Dad. When it counted the most, at your bedside he told the truth. That has to count for something. It does, I said. It doesn't erase what came before it, but it counts. Christmas came 2 months after the surgery, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, both my children sat at the same table without tension humming under every word. I hosted it myself that year, in the same house on Miller Street where they'd grown up, at the same table where Marcus had once talked about payment plans, like I hadn't already exhausted every option, where Dana had once slid a diagnosis across to me and refused to let me carry it alone. Marcus arrived in a car that wasn't dark and low to the ground anymore, a used sedan, practical, the kind of car I might have driven myself 30 years ago. Cheryl came with him, and their 2 girls, who ran straight for Tommy, the 3 of them disappearing into the living room within minutes, laughing about something on someone's phone. Donna brought a casserole and a pie, insisting on doing most of the cooking even though I'd told her, more than once, that I was strong enough now to manage a holiday meal myself. Let me do this, she'd said simply. I like taking care of you. Let me like it. We ate at the same table, the 6 of us crowded around a surface built for 4, elbows bumping, laughter rising and falling in a way that felt, for the first time in years, easy. Marcus made a point, halfway through dinner, of asking Dana about Tommy's grades, about her shifts at the diner, about whether Mel had ever given her that promotion she'd been hoping for. I put in for assistant manager, Dana said, a little shy about it, the way she always was about her own accomplishments. Regina actually helped put together something for it. A little business case, if you can believe that. Never thought I'd need something like that for a diner job. You'll get it, Marcus said, and there was no condescension in it, none of the careful distance that used to sit behind his compliments. You've been running half that place for years anyway. They'd be foolish not to. Dana looked at him for a moment, something unreadable passing between them, before she smiled, small and real. Thanks, she said. That means something coming from you. After dinner, once the kids had scattered to the living room and Cheryl was helping clear plates, Marcus found me alone in the kitchen, rinsing dishes at the sink the way I'd done 1,000 times over 40 years in that house. Let me, he said, taking the towel from where I'd draped it over my shoulder. You should sit down. Doctor's orders, probably. I let him. It felt strange, at first, watching my son dry dishes in my kitchen, something so ordinary it almost undid me. I've been thinking a lot, he said, not looking up from the plate in his hands, about the kind of father I want to be, the kind of son I should have been. He set the plate down carefully, reached for another. I spent so many years thinking success meant never needing help, never admitting when things were falling apart. I watched you work yourself half to death for us, and never ask anyone for anything, and I think I turned that into some kind of rule. Like weakness was the one thing I couldn't afford to show. I never wanted you to learn that from me, I said quietly. I wanted you to learn that family shows up. That's the whole lesson, Marcus. Not that you never need help, that you let people help you, and you help them back without keeping score." He nodded slowly, still drying the same plate long after it was dry. Dana never kept score, not once, through any of this. She just showed up, every time, no matter what it cost her. He set the plate down finally, turning to face me directly. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to make that right with her. What I put her through, watching her carry all of it while I hid. You don't fix it with one gesture," I said. "You fix it the way she showed you how, by showing up again and again for the rest of your life. That's the only way any of this heals." Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Dana in the living room, sitting on the floor with Tommy and Marcus's girls, all three kids laughing at something on the television. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Cheryl sat nearby, and for a moment, watching my whole family occupy one room without a single raised voice, I let myself simply feel grateful. 6 months after the surgery, I went back to Dr. Averill's office for what he told me would likely be my last major scan before shifting to routine yearly checkups. Dana drove me again, though I could have driven myself by then. Some habits, once they take root, are hard to let go of, and I'd stopped minding the company. Dr. Averill came into the room with the same careful, precise manner he'd had since the day he first told me the surgery needed to happen fast. He pulled up the images on his screen, studied them for a long moment, and finally turned to face us both. "Clean," he said. "No signs of recurrence. I'd say, Mr. Combs, that you're officially in remission." I don't think I fully understood, until that moment, how much weight I'd still been carrying without realizing it. The quiet fear that had lived under every good day since the surgery, waiting for permission to finally set itself down. Dana made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, gripping my hand so tight it nearly hurt. "Thank you," I told the doctor, though the words felt too small for what I meant by them. Outside, in the parking lot, Dana called Marcus before we'd even reached the car, holding the phone between us so I could hear. "Clean scan," she said, before he'd even finished saying hello. "Dad's in remission." There was a pause on the line, and then I heard my son's voice crack, heard him say something to Cheryl in the background, heard the particular kind of joy that only comes after months of genuine fear. "I'm coming by tonight," Marcus said. "I don't care what's for dinner. I'm coming by." That evening, both my children arrived within 20 minutes of each other, and for once, there was no tension in the driveway, no careful distance between the two cars parked side by side. We didn't do anything special. Dana made spaghetti. Marcus brought a bottle of wine none of us were sophisticated enough to properly appreciate. Tommy and the girls fought good-naturedly over the last garlic bread. I sat at the head of the table, in the same chair I'd sat in the morning. I got that first phone call to Marcus, the morning that started everything. The fear, the fracture, the slow, hard work of putting a family back together. Cancer had taken something from me that year. My strength, for a while. My savings, entirely. Some of the innocent belief I used to have that my children would always show up the same way, without complication, without needing to be tested first. But it had given something back too, something I hadn't expected. It had shown me exactly who my daughter was in the clearest possible light. A woman who gave everything she had, without hesitation, because that's simply who she'd always been underneath the exhaustion and the double shifts. And it had, eventually, cracked my son open enough to let the truth out. The shame he'd been carrying alone for years, the fear that had made him so afraid to admit he needed help that he nearly lost everything trying to hide it. I looked around that table, at Dana, laughing with her mouth full, at Marcus, watching his daughters with an attentiveness I hadn't seen in him in years, at Tommy explaining some video game to anyone who would listen. And I thought about the man I'd been 8 months earlier, sitting alone in that kitchen at 5 in the morning with a diagnosis and no way to pay for the surgery that would save my life. I hadn't known, that morning, how the story would end. I hadn't known which of my children would show up and which one wouldn't, and I certainly hadn't known that the son who failed me first would eventually be the one to find his way back. But that's the thing about family I've learned. It isn't measured by who has the most to give. It's measured by who gives it anyway, even when it costs them everything, and by who's brave enough, eventually, to be honest about what they couldn't give at all. I raised my glass of wine I wasn't going to finish, and my children raised theirs. not quite understanding yet why I looked so full of something too big for words. To family, I said. All of it. The parts that show up and the parts that finally learn how.